Good morning, good afternoon, hello, and thank you for starting March with CFI again as we connect the dots with Dr. Food. I'm Mickey French. I'm the Executive Director of the Center for Food Integrity, and boy, I swear these first Thursdays come faster and faster all of the time. Um, so as you know, the Center for Food Integrity is focused on building trust and transparency across the food value chain. And once again this year in October, on the 22nd through the 24th, we'll be having our Transparency Summit with new topics on making more bold actions towards becoming a more transparent food system. So keep an eye on foodintegrity.org and on our LinkedIn page, and more information will be forthcoming. So let's kick it off again with Dr. David Hughes, also known as Dr. Food, who will share some of his decades of experience and insights in the food chain. And so as we start off here in March, as we were just chatting before we came on, we know that March is a bit unsettling when it comes to weather. Snow one day, 70 degrees the next here in Chicago. And David, I understand there are daffodils already blooming in the UK.
Absolutely, it's March and it's time for daffodils. Actually, I'm in Wales and they bloom in Wales in March. They must do because March the 1st is St. David's Day, our patron saint, and we celebrate him with daffodils. And yes, they came up again. Thank the Lord for that.
And also on St. David's Day brought us David Hughes. So belated happy birthday to you.
Thank you ever so. Thanks. Too many of them.
We're happy to be live this morning, so please jump into the chat. And if we have a few minutes at the end, we'll answer your questions. So on the theme of unsettling weather and too many birthdays, it sounds like never too many, always not enough. It sounds like there's a great deal of unrest, not only in weather, but amongst farmers across the globe, from India to Prague. What are you hearing and what are you seeing out there, David?
Yes, we talked earlier. You said flustered farmers, and if I choose my words carefully, Mickey, it's flipping flustered farmers. I tell you, I mean, farmers are revolting, and what's more, all around the world, it's intriguing just at the moment. Certainly in Europe, I'll come back to it, but in India, thousands of Indian farmers are marching on Delhi. They want price guarantees for their 25 major crops, and they've even staged a let's quit WTO Day, the World Trade Organization Day. They're saying we don't want food imports. We want you to use our own food. Actually, for India's Prime Minister Modi, he's got a national election coming up, which he'll win, by the by. But it's a classical, really political dilemma for him. He's got half his voters are farmer families, and he has to satisfy them. And half of his population of 1.4 billion receive food subsidies and they want cheap food. So, which one shall I take? But there we go. Over to Europe. I mean, tractors are rolling in Prague as Czech farmers protest. The same in Germany and Spain. As I mentioned, I'm in Wales. We've had a big demonstration in Wales yesterday when Welsh farmers I wonder if you can understand this one, thousands of pairs of, we would say, wellies, of Wellington boots or rubber boots outside the parliamentary building in Wales, and it got a lot of news, I might tell you. And what's the background? Particularly in the EU, well, farmers in the EU get one third of the total EU budget. And it's for supporting farmers so they can keep going because, it's a small scale farmer environment in Europe. There are 9 million farmers in the EU. 80% have less than 12 acres. I mean, that's not a farm, it's a big garden or even a medium sized garden. And the government is a major source of income for those part-time farmers. And the EU government is saying, all right, you can have your subsidy, but you have to do increasingly radical environmental actions. I mean, the fact of the matter is that big farmers get the big money. So the subsidy is related to how many acres that you farm. So 20% of farmers get 80% of the money, just by the by. But the government has been put under pressure and been told back off your environmental requests because it costs too much for us to do that, and we're being just pinched because of high input prices and the like. So So climate change, it's a political issue just at the moment, but it's also a stark reality. February was our warmest February in history, for goodness sake. There's a problem there. It's not a political issue; it's a reality, and so at some stage we have to come to terms with it.
Yeah. We have a question in the chat we may come back to at the end to go deeper into that topic indeed. So, it's a tough balancing act, especially in the year where there are top leader elections around the globe.
Yeah.
So, our next topic is really making the price right for eating out of home. So, talk to us a little bit about what consumers are going to have to make trade-offs on, and are there opportunities in tough economic times for restaurants?
Right. Well, it is a cost of living crisis. I mean, this little nugget is related to food service. In the UK, we spend about 40% of our total food budget on food away from home, whereas you have a higher level. It's in under normal times, it's about 55, 56% in the US. And just to remind us that we're in polarized income times. We always have been, but it's accelerated now. And the top 20% of consumers in the UK and in the US spend 3.5 times more on food than those in the bottom 20% of households in terms of income. And so from a food service perspective, it's you need to have an offer for lower income households. And I've just seen a really good example in the UK. It's about an iconic company. It's been around a long time now, called Greggs the Baker, who sort of focused particularly on a food offer for lower income groups. So Greggs has got about 2,300 stores. And what took me, why I'm mentioning it, is that last year, 2023, they had about $2.3 billion worth of sales. It's not a huge company, but it's a pretty big company. And what's more, in a very difficult year, they increased sales by 20% year on year, when people were pinched. And so how did they do that? Well, their genesis of the company is from the northeast of England, which is a strong working class area, and that's their focus. They have a strong working class presence. It's based on sweet and savory, affordable options. They've got a iconic sausage roll, for example, which is much loved right around the country. And they do a vegan version, which is a social media darling, for goodness sake. As you'd expect, they do sweetie stuff, donuts and essentially pastry just dipped in sugar, which we can't resist. We've got a Greggs just down the road from me. I mean, 5 minutes away from my home in Wales. And when Susan Hughes isn't watching, I sort of sneak down and buy a breakfast bacon roll and a cup of coffee for $3.60, which I consider a deal. I mean, for goodness sake, you can pay $3.60 for one coffee in Starbucks, for goodness, or in many coffee shops. So if you have the right offer, you can do well at the bottom end, but also at the higher end. I mean, a sub-example is that we've got a whole chain here, which you've got too in the US, called Pret. It originally was called Pret a Manger. It's owned by JAB Holdings, which is an uber wealthy German family group. And what intrigued me is that they've launched a subscription service. Now, that's not unique, not original, but it costs you $50 per month. That's not, that's something. And for your $50 a month, you get 5 coffees per day free if you really want 5, plus 20% off everything they sell in terms of food and drinks. It's a really bold subscription move, and I wish them well. Greggs share price, I was just noting, their stock price, I should say, has gone up 50% over the last 12, 14 months. It's a nice little example.
Wow. Yeah, I like seeing some of these innovations coming in to hit just different parts of the market segmentation. So, as you know, you are part of our Consumer Trust Insights Council, and we meet each month and share with our members some of the tidbits that come out of that. One of the topics that I know Nick Faraday from Rabobank is very interested in is the the proliferation of ultra processed foods, or the new terminology behind ultra processed foods. What's in the headlines over there as you're reading the news on your side of the pond?
Right. Well, it's on UPF. Remember, it's got its own acronym now. I mean, the USA is number one in world consumption of ultra processed foods, and the UK is number two. And as thinking about it, I mean, it's not a league table that you necessarily want to be top of, but we are one way or another. And it is a big topic here. I was taken by, there was a recent headline in one of our most read papers, The Guardian, and it was ultra processed foods linked to 32 harmful effects for health. It was like a meta study, the largest on offer, and it was suggesting that this world's largest review of ultra processed foods that's showing higher risks of cancer, heart disease, and early death. So for my mind, it's a bandwagon that really rolls on. I mean, do I have a view on it? Well, whatever you think of the science of this study, or indeed of ultra processed food, it will have an impact on the food industry, and I think particularly for the big food guys. Though worrisomely, though, Mickey, it's another wrinkle in the world of food that will confuse consumers on food matters. I was just looking at another major European survey that showed that a majority of consumers really uncertain, or just don't get right. They get it wrong on what is or what is not an ultra processed food. So expect to hear a lot more about this, and it will influence the industry, I think, in quite a big way.
Yeah, agree, agree. And I think in that case, really trust and transparency become even more important as big food companies
Sure.
come out to really talk about how their food is made. So we have a couple more minutes, and we have some great tidbits from TV shows to what you can call meat on your side of the pond. So share a few of those with us.
Right, in I go. Okay, the first one relates to a presenter called Jeremy Clarkson, who is known in the US actually for his Top Gear Motorhead program for men fame. And he bought a farm, which is called, I love it, Diddley Squat Farm. And he's now into his third TV series showing how hard farming is. And what was intriguing, particularly with the first series, where people thought, what, why, it can't be a success, but it was hugely successful. And in May, he's starting his third session, and actually and they're streamed on Amazon Prime for those who want to know. And he's been winning UK farming industry prizes for his ability to communicate well with the public about just how damn hard it is to farm. And consumers say, God, we didn't realize it was that difficult. So that's one. Two, hot off the press in terms of nugget, France now has a law prohibiting meat terms like ham, bacon, steak, etc. from being used in describing meat alternatives. And of course, they're not the first in Europe. I noticed that in Italy, it's against the law even to produce and market cultivated meat, let alone talk about it, which they see as a frontline assault on Italian food cultures. And let me pop in a third nugget if I can. It's about gene editing. The EU Parliament has just given the thumbs up to gene editing, particularly of the CRISPR type, on the grounds that it will reduce pesticide use. And so it puts gene editing products into a notably completely different regulatory category than GMOs, which are largely completely banned. But what sort of intrigues me, and why I mention it, is that say, yes, thumbs up to gene editing, but we will ban patenting of gene edited products. And what sort of concerns me about that is, if I look at the major seed producers around the world, and you know them well in the US, then in history, they've spent as much as 10% of the total revenue on R&D to come up with great improved seeds. And I just don't see them doing it if they can't sort of have the IP associated with it in the future. But so let's see.
Interesting. For those interested more in gene editing, on our website, again, foodintegrity.org, we are the host of a gene editing coalition and have a number of guides and information about gene editing there. So please join us. So we have no more questions in the chat, so we must have sufficiently answered many questions today. So thank you.
Wasn't there one? Didn't we have one quick one right at the beginning?
There was one, and feel free to come back to this. Any additional insight on how the EU protests will be resolved?
Well, yeah, I mean, the problem is at the moment, as I see the EU government backing off and willing to water down their proposals. Well, you know, that's fine and dandy. It reminds me that the squeaky wheel does get the grease, but it's worrisome in the long term. At some stage, we have to get a handle around this climate change and what type of actions we should take.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that. All right, so thank you again for joining us. Our next edition of Dr. Food and Connecting the Dots is April 4th. And just a reminder, please visit us online at our new website and keep an eye out for all of the programming opportunities, research that's coming up, as well as our summit coming up, so we have a chance to meet face-to-face in October. So David, thank you again.
Thank you.
Everybody have a great month, and we'll see you in April.
Cheerio. Yeah. Have a good March.
Well, thank you. Bye-bye.